Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the sometimes messy, emotional, and more nuanced aspects of being a dog parent. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper. You can find us at juniperpet.co to read more, download our free guides, and find the best emerging pet products. My co-host is Haley Young, dog mom of Scout and writer for Juniper, and her own website, Pause and Reflect. You can find that at pause, P-A-W-S, and reflect.blog. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. I'm here with Haley, who's going to be interviewing me today. Haley, maybe I'll just let you kick it off.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We've gotten to work together for a while now, but there are still a few questions that have never really come up in an in-depth way in our conversations. And I think it'll be really interesting for everyone else to hear as well. And fun to return the favor since you got to interview me. So the first thing that, I've thought about and wondered before is, I know you've talked about this in other places, and this was sort of your main pursuit in your past life, pre-Juniper. Can you share a little bit about your experience founding Tech Ladies? And, how has that background informed your excitement about and your approach to Juniper? Because this is not your first time starting a company.
Sure. Yeah. So this is my second company. And it's so different. I started Tech Ladies, for those who don't know, probably most dog owner listeners don't know, but we were a community for women in tech. And we worked with a lot of hiring partners to help them hire more women in technology. So it was super fun. I ran it for 8 years, sold the company about 2 years ago now. And then I took some time off to think about what I would want to do next. And that's how sort of not even just the idea for Juniper came about, but all the ideas for what Juniper is sort of emerging to be came about during that time. But yeah, I was living in New York for many, many years, building my company. And they're such different companies in a way, because Tech Ladies was, finding all the women who work in technology. And so to some degree, that was kind of niche. Maybe there, at max could be 1 million or 2 million women like that in the United States. Then we look at dog ownership and it's so huge. So it's been interesting to see how, well, that doesn't mean it's easier just because there's more people in it, right? It almost makes it harder in a way, because it's okay, now we really need to find, the type of dog owner that would want to join Juniper and then really deliver a lot of value to them.
Yeah, that all makes complete sense to me. And I think it's been really fun to see the energy that you bring to Juniper and all of the knowledge that you have about starting a company in the past. And just the excitement, but also the confidence that you've sort of been here just in a different industry. And you're a very fun startup founder to work with. It gets to be fun and exciting and, not over the top stressful, which I know that sometimes these smaller pursuits really can be. So I think that's fantastic. So speaking of, coming from the tech world and now into the pet space, your experiences clearly complement each other, but these are also really different industries. Can you talk a bit about what that transition has been like? And, what traits do you think are most important for success when changing it up? What things would you tell your past self, or, tell somebody else who came to you and was interested in making a similar big move?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to pivot. So going from tech to pets has been really different. So far, I found the pet space to be super welcoming, very down to earth. And interestingly, what's been kind of fun for me is that the pet space seems to be a little bit suspicious about tech and technology and tech solutions in pets, which I've found really interesting, but also it's refreshing, because when you're in tech, it's a real echo chamber of well, of course we're changing the world with all this amazing technology. And then it's how many of those things end up successful anyway, In pets, these are real people with real pets. Everything needs to work. And I like building like that. So I've enjoyed that transition. I think for anybody pivoting from, one thing to the next, I think it's good to almost underestimate it a little if you're thinking about going from one type of job to a completely different type of job. And you're oh, I'm changing industries or something I think you need to focus on the things that will translate and come over. So for me, that's there's a lot about business and the way that I run businesses that I'm absolutely bringing over. And the way I like to run a business is thinking about things long terms. That's thinking about everything long term. So even if somebody signs up for our free email list, that is super valuable. How can we always make sure that we're sending them something valuable, that they get, they're learning something from Juniper all the time and that they feel connected to us. It's like maybe in the future they'll make a purchase off of our website when we launch our shop. Maybe they'll never buy anything, but they just love reading it. Like that doesn't matter. Like as long as they're with us for a long time and trust us and we're building that community and that brand. And so that's how I love to build things and think about things in a long-term way, which you don't really get to do in tech as much. There's like a lot of external pressures and all of that. So I think that's one thing I really like about it. But I think anybody who's thinking of transitioning from, one sector to the next, like don't be so intimidated. Just focus on the things that you know that you're good at that will translate. Because really like people are the same everywhere generally, right? So like they click on the same types of things or they're interested, and so when you're defining your audience, it's really just figuring out like, who am I talking to? What would make them interested? But a lot of things are similar, across different sectors. So I think it's really easy for people to say like, well, I've only ever done this, so I can't go into that. And, I didn't even really think about that. I just started a new company in pets because that's like what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you just launched into it. And I think that speaks so much to the relationship that you have with Addie and how much she's already influenced your life. I know that we talk about this all the time, just offline, the two of us. And that's really the whole idea behind Juniper is this love for our pets and this sense that we aren't crazy for loving our pets this much and that this is such a worthwhile pursuit. Like there are so many fellow dog lovers out there and all of these pet parents who can benefit from, this focused sense of community and the education pieces and all of that building together. And I just get so excited about it because, that's my passion too. And it's really fun to have someone like you with all of this past experience and this past success coming into the pet space and thinking a little bit differently about it, but still being so aligned on that core value of what we ultimately want out of the relationship with our dogs. Which brings me to my next question.
Ooh, yes, go ahead. I'm like, I could talk about that for an hour probably too.
Right. This is kind of our bread and butter. But clearly Addie is a huge part of your life and your career. Like again, the idea for Juniper in the first place was so largely inspired by her. And she also has a ton of energy as this young cattle dog mix. Scout's also a cattle dog mix, but she's got several years on Addie at this point, and I can remember some of those younger, more chaotic days with so much going on. How do you make time for everything? And how does your role as dog mom complement your role as entrepreneur? I think that sometimes it's easy for people to see these areas of their life as separate or like think about how their role as a dog mom might make their career harder actually. And I feel like for you, it's often the reverse and that these things build on each other really well. So could you talk about that a little?
Yeah, well, I think I got Addie during a time when I was between when I sold my last company and before I started my new company, and when she was a puppy. So I had like a lot of great time with her when she was a puppy and training. But that's also when I was diving in and realizing like how many things that there should be in the world for pet parents that we don't have. And that's why I was like jotting everything down for things that Juniper launched as, but also could potentially grow into be and serve people for one day. Yeah, so for me, like a lot of what I'm focused on now is just like, how can I keep the parts of what I really loved when I was like totally not working? It was the first time in my life that I wasn't working. So it was a really good chance to step back and be like, okay, what are the other things I enjoy in life? What are they? And where does work fit in with that? What types of things do I really like to do at work? And what types of things do I really not like to do? And how can I figure out how to do the things I really like and I'm really good at and not do the things that I don't like and I'm not good at? And then similarly, like the things I love doing with her, how can I make sure I can still do those? And so one of the biggest transformations for me is like after I got Addie, my dog, I always joke about like step count going up. Like I have a really high energy cattle dog mix, as you mentioned. And like we need to walk, we need to get out, we need to be running. We go running together now. So like getting those like 10 to 12,000 steps a day is like a new non-negotiable. And so when you start to like put that into your work day, it's like, okay, I gotta do some in the morning, take a few meetings. And so I think really just like I found creative ways around that while running a new business, which are like, if it doesn't need to be a Zoom meeting on video, if it's someone I've met with a couple times or it's just a catch up call with somebody type of thing, like, can you call me on the phone so I could be walking my dog while we're having this meeting? Right. Obviously, there's some calls where we can't do that. But like figuring out how to fold that kind of thing in, and then structuring my day so that, because it isn't just, this is an example of what I found when I started Juniper, which was that like I kind of thought originally, I just love animals so much. I've always loved animals. I always wanted to do something more in the space with animals. What would that be? How could we make their lives better? Okay, let's just start out by focusing on dogs. How could we make dogs' lives better? You and I syncing up on like the content and writing tips and what would that look like? And I very, very quickly learned that anytime you're working on something to make a dog's life better, it's definitely also making like a person's life better. I think something I struggled with a little bit when I first started it was like, wow, I could say so clearly that in my last company, like we were helping women who were underrepresented in technology find jobs and make more money. Like that felt so good to be helping people in that way and have that as sort of like our North Star, even while we were building this business and monetizing it and figuring out how to grow the business side of things. We always knew we were helping people. And at first I was like, well, I love dogs. So sure, let's help dogs. But now I realize that it's like anytime you're doing that, you're also helping people too. And it's so interconnected and you can't even really like take it apart. So it's like Addie getting enough exercise is me getting more exercise, and everything is like that in the animal space.
I love that so much. The interplay of doing things that are good for our dogs and then simultaneously, either by default, doing things that are good for us, like the step example. Like it's great for us to get physical exercise. And sometimes making sure that we prioritize that for our pets helps us prioritize it for us. But then also just like applying all of the skills that we learn through them as well. I know that like for me, so many of the things that I learned about Scouts fulfillment and meeting Scouts needs have helped me think more critically about what I need out of a day, which sort of circles back to what you were saying with like what parts of your work life do you enjoy and are you good at, and how can you set up your days so that there are more of those and less of the ones that are less enjoyable. And I just feel like that's sort of this like huge underlying concept for us just in living with dogs overall. Like how can we prioritize things well, and how can we grow together and make space for all of those incredible things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that it like puts that check-in, like it's been pouring rain here recently and there was no way I would have gone on the walks where I get soaked head to toe just for my fitness. Like in a year ago, there were like 2 years ago, there would have been no chance I would have done that. Like I'm going out because she needs to walk. So it pushes you to do it. So then that's just one example. But let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, and then we'll come back and hear the rest of the questions that you have for me. Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes.
All right, I'll hop back in. It's fun to be on this side of the podcast. Earlier, before the break, you were talking a little bit about how you got Addie as a puppy, and that was a time when you were, between work after selling Tech Ladies and before starting Juniper, and how it was a little bit overwhelming at times. You were jotting down all of these pieces of information, things that you had learned, things that you wanted to improve at, things that you maybe just hadn't realized were part of raising a dog. How does that tie into the goal of Juniper? I feel like your foundational experiences with Addie were such a huge part of your vision for what this company is going to become.
Yeah, totally. I think like there's so many aspects and it was hard to not like launch and have it be confusing. Like what is Juniper? What do we do? Well, we want to do a million things. It's like, okay, so when we launch, what is it? So I think like leading with the content first, like it being really high quality content, but then differently, like, so obviously you can Google a lot of things about your dog. You can already Google, what do I do when my dog XYZ? And so I think the vision from the beginning has really been like, what's the not necessarily Googleable stuff about your dog that we could write about from experience, but not the kind of experience where we're like, we are trainers and we will tell you how to train XYZ. This is how to do it. You and I have always been very passionate about the idea that like every dog is different, every person is different, everybody's needs are different, and all of the advice seems to be very one size fits all. So I've been very passionate about Juniper being from the content perspective being more about nuance and really understanding how people and dogs connect and what they need and for each other, and how to give advice with that in mind and guidance with that in mind. And so like I've been really happy and proud of that being the content that we lead with, and also really surprised at how valuable this can be. Like when you are the type of person who researches a ton, you get really into dog world, right? Like you're going to know all of this, but most people get a dog, and then train, do maybe some version of training, whatever, and then get busy and go back to their daily life. And so it's like Juniper is really like, how can we fit into your life? We have the weekly newsletter where we're sending you tips. So I think just focusing on the content from that perspective feels different. And then also, always knew there was going to be a product component where I started to really nerd out when I started shopping for Addie about toys, accessories, gear, trying everything. And I was really surprised to find such a gap in quality, like everything from something that is very cheap, but also falling apart, to something that's like middle of the road, but really, really good. And then the expensive stuff that's fun and like splurgy for once in a while. And I think most pet parents are like, well, what do I do? Where do I get this stuff? Like, how do I find the good stuff? And I also think, what Juniper wants to be for delivering pet product discovery to people will really be around what's the good stuff that I haven't even heard of, or what's the tried and true stuff that I can trust that if I buy it from you, it's because, I understand that this is like a brand that you really know and like. And then on the other side, I started doing, even pre-launching Juniper, interviews with a lot of these people making like up and coming pet products. And I just was so surprised at how like a lot of these are small to medium businesses doing amazing things with very little support, just being thrown into like the direct to consumer world and then figuring out how to sell on their own. And so I was thinking like, wouldn't it be great if there was a website where you could discover the best pet products from a place that you already trust because of some other reason, which is you're reading our content or you trust us, you're in our community, maybe you listen to the podcast. And so it's all kind of connected in that way.
I think that's so huge, especially the level of trust. And like, we live in this world where it's so common to have Instagrams for your dog. Or if you don't have a dog specific Instagram, it's likely that you might follow a couple of pet accounts, and the space just continues to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are all of these influencers and all of these products constantly being shared and talked about. And on the one hand, that's really cool, right? Because there's so much more access to learn about all of these things and to be exposed to different types of toys, treats, stuff that we wouldn't have maybe come across all on our own. But also, it can be really overwhelming and it can be confusing and hard to know, like, who do you trust? Which voice do you listen to? What exactly is the relationship? Like, disclosures are sort of notoriously poor on social media still, even though we're this many years into these sorts of partnerships being commonplace. And so I just really love that aspect of it, like actually trying to curate really thoughtfully what sorts of things are helpful properly, and coming back to that nuance and that context of what things are best for different dogs or different lifestyles. And it's not just necessarily like, here's the best thing across the board for everyone, right? But here are some things to think about to choose the best thing. And I feel like there's so much value in that.
From the e-commerce side of things, I've been thinking a lot about what would be useful to people. Like there are so many ways to shop. So it's like, obviously there's your local pet stores. If you're lucky to live in a city with like a really curated, cool pet store, you may already have access to some of these brands and understand this. But if you don't, then like Juniper could be the place for you to discover and find these brands, and then there's obviously like big box stores. Like people get their pet stuff actually from all different kinds of places. Dog ownership and also the way that we view our dogs and the way that we want to shop for them is changing. And so us being like a little ahead of that, I think is really fun because we're really experimenting with it. Basically, like we get to work with all of these brands and they give us discounts that we can pass along to folks in Juniper. And then we're handpicking anything we show you that's like a product on the site, So obviously you come to our site, you sign up for free, You get all of the content. You can read our guides and download our guides. Everything is like super useful. But then if you're looking for stuff and you want to come over, like we've curated these brands for you and we have discounts for you. And the discounts are nice because a lot of these brands are slightly more on the expensive side. Like if you want the cheapest collar, like you should go to Petco and like just, or if your puppy's going to grow out of something in 5 seconds and you don't care what it looks like that's fine. You and I are always talking about like, what's the stuff you actually would want to spend money on? Like you don't have to invest in everything. And so the curation helps with that. I think like I went a little crazy when my dog was a puppy and I kept thinking we were done growing and buying really nice stuff. And then she kept growing out of it. Like if I get another puppy someday, which is a whole other episode, whether we would get a puppy or not, I wouldn't really shop like the nice stuff until later, until I'm sure they're done growing. But so it's things like that, like you live and you learn a little bit, But yeah, I think like having that curation, thinking about like where e-commerce is going to go in the next couple of years. So we're in our first like couple of months of building Juniper, we're so early. Thinking about like how are people going to shop? As you mentioned, like there's so many Instagram influencers like shouting out products and like we really don't know if like did that brand deal reach them or do they truly love that stuff? And it's like, yeah, if you've been following them for a while, you might be able to trust it. But if you follow us and you trust us and you know that we're saying no to a lot of brands or we tried it and we just didn't really love it, that there's like a level of rigor and value to what we're putting and listing on our site. And I think that that's going to be really valuable to have just like people who care and nerd out way too much over pet products to deliver that value to people. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing for like the past years, trying and learning every pet brand out there and seeing what the stuff I think is the best and then sharing stuff amongst our team and kind of trying things out that way.
And Addie is perfect for it because, again, as previously mentioned, she is such a high energy, intense, really fun dog. And so, if a dog with her level of play can enjoy all of these things and they, if they can last for her is what I'm trying to say, then they will definitely last for a bunch of other dogs because I think she's on the higher end.
Oh, absolutely. I know she's exceptional at like tearing stuff too. So if we ever say something is like built tough or it's for a super chewer, like it was tested on Addie and we know that is pretty intense. I mean, I saw her once. I've tried every type of chew that's out on the market for her. And I took her to the pet store and I was like interested in trying yak chews. They were like one of the only ones we hadn't tried, but I heard they could be dangerous like any chew, and so I just literally gave her one in the store. And everybody, even, with pit bulls and all sorts of like super chewer dogs told me that like that was their best super chew bone type thing to give their dog. And Addie just like literally bit into it and split the yak chew in half inside the pet store. And I was like, okay, we can't have this. She bit one of the elk antlers, which are supposed to last a really long time. Some people love those. Their dogs will play with them for like 3 months. Cracked it within 1 hour. Luckily, I was right there, but so she can't be left alone with anything. But, we found some stuff. We like beef cheek rolls and bully sticks with supervision and a ton of water. But, it's these trial and error type things that like I've done with my dog. And, she's a good tester for that type of stuff, for sure.
Absolutely. And it just emphasizes that everybody's situation is different and that that's part of the value of having the team and the community when recommending things because the types of chews and toys that Scout really, really enjoys overlap in some ways with what Addie loves, but there are also a lot of key differences. And those are, because of age, because of personality, because of lifestyle, all of these factors. And so when we have a wider cross section of that, and then we can take a look and, sort of understand what things are really great in certain contexts, I feel like that's also so helpful. Instead of just like, the very classic, this worked for me, it's going to work for you, sort of like that shallow, everyone should take the same approach and have the same things. I really love that we're not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's very likely that something that works for one dog will really not work for another. And I know from like volunteering and fostering dogs too, like I've just done to see so many different types of dogs now and what they're going to get into, what they get into trouble with, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's even like, when we go back to talking about like the content we're putting out and the knowledge that we're trying to share, I have been really interested to learn that some things that like you and I might be like, oh, well, everybody already knows that. There's still something to learn about it, right? So, like, we have this, like, you were just editing the microchip article. And, like, even within that article, like, I thought I knew everything about microchips. And I was like, oh, no, that's an interesting fact about a microchip. Like, I have to log into the website if I move. Oh, yeah. Like, that's something to, like, we should tell people about? And so there's so many, like, little things about pet ownership that whether you know a lot or a little, I've been surprised to see that we can share information that is brand new to like huge audiences and so helpful and like literally could save dogs' lives, like information like that. It's all over the place, like anything else, right? So we can really be a place to teach people about some of this stuff. And it's not just that Juniper is like, it's for newbie dog parents. Although if you're like a brand new dog parent, I think it's great to come and learn a lot of stuff from Juniper. But even if you're like pretty in it, there's going to be things that we unearth that are like really helpful. You could see this by following our Instagram. And that's the stuff that's been like people click on the most is, a lot of content about like, what you should ask before you send your dog to doggy daycare was really popular. And like just looking at like what things that we've done on the site so far already are resonating and popular with people have shown me how important this work is and like how much more there is we can do.
Absolutely. And even when you've been in the dog world for years, like it's going on 6 for me and going on 2 for you really in depth, like there are still things that I know sometimes in some part of my brain somewhere, but I've sort of forgotten about them. And then I need to see it again and it'll jog my memory. And that's also really valuable in its own way. Like I might factually understand a piece of information, but I just haven't touched it in so long, haven't thought about it, and it's not top of mind. And then a nicely curated piece of content can help jog my memory and make me think, oh yeah, like when's the last time that I gave Scout a designated chew to make sure that she was getting the chewing time? We do all of these other things. And like, I know that that's also a natural instinct, but I've just haven't been thinking about it. And I still have these moments, I mean, weekly, probably daily.
Yes, absolutely. There's things like that where it's just like keeping it top of mind can be helpful. And then also just like, I think helping people feel seen as far as the emotional parts of dog ownership go. So you and I talk about this a lot, but I think like, I thought, there was a right way to train your dog and a wrong way. And anytime something wasn't working, I must have just been doing it the wrong way. And now I know that one, it's a process. And two, it kind of never ends and shouldn't end. It's not just like you do this and then your puppy turns into a perfect dog. And I think like zooming out has been really helpful for me to say like, okay, like even like this weekend I'm planning, my dog is 18 months, like she'll be 2 over the summer. But I'm like, we have to go back out and go work on recall again. We're going to go back out with a long line into like a field that we kind of know that isn't super exciting to her anymore. I mean, when she was a puppy, we couldn't do this kind of work because everything was just too exciting. So nothing was sinking in. And it's like, yeah, oh yeah, I want to be a good dog parent. Like I'm going to go back and we're going to bring some high value treats and go back to the drawing board with recall and just keep working on it. She's got it down in a yard. She's got it down in her friend's yard. But there's no way she would do it in a park. Let's take a long line and get to work on. Like it's just the acceptance piece took me so long to get to, the acceptance of how long things can take. It's made me a better and more patient person overall. But it's just, I think like we can help people see that too. Like you have emotional support with us to know that like these things take time and you just have to zoom out. And so, I mean, I still need reminding of that too. If we have like a bad walk or something, I'm like, okay, she was over capacity. We'll try again tomorrow. But in the beginning, I was like, what am I doing wrong? So I think like if we can help provide that like acceptance and support and non-judgmental space for people, I think that that's like something really valuable we can bring with Juniper too.
Yeah. You know how much I relate to those feelings of overwhelm and, oh my gosh, am I failing? Is it me? And the community aspect can just be so incredibly powerful. On that note, I have one last question for you. If you could tell, like, just hypothetically, you are on a loudspeaker talking into the ear of every single dog parent in the whole world. Every dog parent is going to hear what you have to say, and you can tell them just one thing. What one thing do you wish every dog parent knew?
Don't judge yourself in this process and don't limit your dog. So, like, don't judge yourself if you're not doing great with this training yet, or even your emotions around your dog. But then also don't think that your dog can't ever do it. I think, like, we say a lot, like, well, we tried that and it didn't work, so maybe this dog just can't do that. Or I think we think too much about breed, or even, like, I see this all the time with rescues where people are like, well, they were a rescue, so they can't do this or they can't do that, or they might have had this background. Like, no dog has, like, dogs don't have limits. Like, they do, but you shouldn't be the one to put a limit on your dog, because, like, just give it more time. Like, there will be things that you didn't think that they could do, if you are taking the right approach to it. So it's just, like, I say, less judgment all the way around. Less judgment of yourself with your dog and less judgment of your dog. Like, let them be dogs, and tell you what they are good at, and might be good at. And then don't ever say, like, we're done. We're done, and they'll never be an off leash dog, or they'll never go swimming, or whatever it is. Like, you don't know. See what fits to your lifestyle and what you really want them to work on, and then they're gonna keep surprising you.
Yeah, it's all ongoing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most fun parts, is, like, seeing your dog kind of, like, grow and turn into something else. And I think that's been really rewarding. Like, as much as I love cats, and Juniper will probably have a cat section of the site someday. I have a senior cat, for those who don't know, who I love so much. It was my first baby before Addie, but, like, the growth you get with dogs is so different, where, you can see that things click, and the training, and, like, your life can expand with them. The places you take them could potentially expand depending on, how your dog is doing or what they're up for. So it's just fun to be able to see that kind of growth. I think some of this might be speaking to the reactive dog parents who understand where I'm coming from. And some might just be, like, dogs who are not that trained, but are now coming up and growing up or becoming more trained. So I think it's true to some degree for everybody.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, thank you so much for the interview today and the questions. I hope that was helpful, and that some people learned a little bit more about me and learned a little bit more about what Juniper is and what we're planning for Juniper. And this is really just the beginning. We're just a few months in. So stay tuned and stick with us, and we will talk to you soon. That's all for today. To learn more about your dog and discover the best hand-picked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.